We're going to talk about valve train geometry. Very critical to make your valve train last is getting the correct push rod length, for this to work correctly. And what you want to look for is when that valve is all the way up. I just got some test springs on there, some really lightweight test springs. Is that the contact point on this roller to the valve needs to be that side of the valve. It needs just to the inside of the center line. So as the valve opens, you'll see this thing will actually roll across the top of that valve and come toward the outside. Then as it gets further open, it actually goes back toward that side. So because the idea of it is to roll through the middle of that center line. You want to start this line, roll through the middle of it and go back to the other side, so you're pushing right dead center of that valve. Because if you're pushing outside the side of that valve a lot, it's just going to wear the valve guides out and have all kinds of issues like you wouldn't believe. But that's what you need to do. You got to make sure that rocker is just that side of the push rod, that side of the valve stem, and then as it opens, it goes across it. And then that's done by valve. And what causes that is how you get that is push rod length. And the other thing you gotta watch out for too, if you get too short of a push rod, you get way canted like that, this thing here will actually bottom out on that rocker, on the stud. This is bottom out stud, so you want to make sure you have a little bit of a gap so that thing's going to move freely on that stud. You know, if it gets to the bottom, it's going to drag. The other thing too you got to watch out for in these things here is that this slot is only so wide, and obviously, you know, like anything else, you know, like a small block Chevy, like these rockers are made for a small block Chevy. The valve angle of small block Chevy is 23 degree angle. They're not straight up and down perpendicular like a Kohler Commander. They're canted. So this groove is not quite right for some situations. You have a really high lift cam and you got too long of a push rod, you'll go to open it, and what's going to happen, you're going to open that thing and it's going to, this poly nut's going to bottom out in this lift rocker right here. And what does that, it's just going to flex that rocker stud over and break the stud off. So if you have one like that, you know, you're shorting your push rod length to give you enough travel on that thing. And if you still run trouble, you can try to change rockers like our CompCam Pro Magnum rockers we use. They have a bigger slot, you don't have to worry about bottoming out, but these aluminum rockers they're a little more material and they have a chance to bottom out. If they do bottom out, you take a die grinder, you can open up this arc through here so you have more travel on it, just so you have, just don't bottom out, so you have enough travel on that. And that's what you have to do for valve train geometry to get it to survive. You need to make sure that roller is just that side of the center line of the valve stem. So as it rolls through, it rolls across that stem and it comes back. So it's rolling through the middle of the arc, through the middle of the center line of the stem. So it keeps the valve guide from wearing out and it don't cause any binding on your valve train. Very important to make sure you have that right. So, but that is all you have to do to check that. And what we do, what I like doing too, and it's an easy way, if you don't have a push rod around to figure out what you need, go down to the hardware store, and they got that wooden dowel rod that's about this diameter. Take that wooden dowel rod, cut it off a length you think, you know, usually a stock Kohler Command push rod is 6 inches long approximately. With the 300 thousandths longer valve, you know you're going to need something about 300 thousandths longer, just by math-wise, push rod than 6 inches. And it depends on the base circle of your cam, too. If you got a smaller base circle on your cam, it's going to take a longer push rod because that center line from the base circle of the cam up to that rocker is further distance. So the best way to do it, to figure out what length push rod you do, go down, just put some test springs on like we did, some light little springs in there, and go down and buy a piece of wooden dowel rod. Cut it to a length you want to start with. You'll make a mark in the sand, like, you know, try 6.5 inches as the starting point, and you'll kind of take it over to the grinder, make a little ball on it, like each end of it. Then you put that in your engine and you'll just mock it up. And you can roll it over there and see if it's all going to work. If that's too long, take it a little bit off that thing and get the piece of dowel rod you really like, the right length that you're happy with. And push rods are made in 50 thousandths increments. This is a 6400 here. And then, you know, measure the overall length and get one closest to what you ground on the wooden dowel stick. And that's the easiest way to do it, and it's the cheapest way. You can buy one of those pieces of dowel stick for about $3 at the hardware store, and use the side cutters to cut it off. Take it over the bench grinder and grind a little ball on it, and put a light test spring on it so you can kind of tell where you're going to be, and you'll know how it's going to work for you. Actually put it all together and figure out now what I'm going to do, you know. Because with heavy valve springs on, they'll break that wood dowel rod, so that way you use a light spring on it. That's a hardware store spring. I use a little split collar on it to hold it in place. So if you don't have a split collar, you can use the regular retainer and the regular keepers on it to use as a holder on it too. So either way it worked, but that's what you need to do to make it work. And the other thing too is you want to check out too is once you get this all set up, this plate will move back and forth. It's slotted, so you want to make and drift this thing back and forth. So when you have your engine put together, you want to move this back and forth so you get that rocker to line up right in the middle of the stem, because it depends as you see how this moves back and forth. You might set so each one's right in the middle, and then torque tighten them down there. That way, your roller will be lined up in the middle of the stem. And these rocker studs, I think, are torqued to 65 foot-pounds, so they torque pretty tight. So, and then the poly nut is just like you do a regular adjustment. You just you back that little set screw off, tighten this down to get your valve lash right. Back this a little bit, tighten the set screw down, then jam that down tight. Don't gotta be overly tight, just gotta be snug, so don't work loose when it's running. And that's what you gotta do to set valve lash.